If this hits close to home, tap that subscribe button. More of this is coming your way. You think you know yourself. You believe that when something really matters, a big financial call, a relationship, a moment that could change everything, you slow down, weigh the options, and make the rational choice. But here's something that'll flip that belief upside down. You don't. You almost never do. And the wild part, the dangerous part, the part that researchers spent decades trying to figure out, your brain fights you every step of the way, not out of malice, but out of pure, ancient efficiency. It's trying to protect you, and in doing so, it quietly steers you off a cliff. Think about the last time you made a gut call that turned out to be wrong. Maybe you jumped at an opportunity that felt so obvious in the moment, or you avoided a risk that, looking back, wasn't nearly as scary as it seemed. You probably told yourself there was a reason, a logical one, and it felt real. It was real. That's the trap. Because what most people don't realize, what almost nobody walks around consciously aware of, is that your brain runs two completely separate operating systems at the same time. Two voices, two speeds, two totally different agendas. The first one is fast, almost invisible. It fires before you even notice it's working. It's the part of you that pulls your hand back from a hot stove before your conscious mind registers pain. It's the part that reads someone's face in a fraction of a second and tells you whether to trust them. It doesn't reason, it reacts. And it's been doing this since long before language existed. The second one is slower, deliberate. It's the voice you think is running the show, the one that plans, calculates, and argues with itself before making a decision. It feels like you, it sounds like you, but here's what's wild. Most of the time, it's not actually in charge. It's just signing off on whatever the faster system already decided. Researchers call them System 1 and System 2, and the relationship between them is the hidden architecture beneath every single choice you make, including the ones you're most certain about. And that's where things get genuinely unsettling, because System 1, that fast automatic machine, has blind spots. It carries biases baked in so deep that even brilliant, trained, highly educated people can't escape them. Studies conducted with experienced statisticians, people who literally study probability for a living, showed that when those same experts made intuitive, off-the-cuff judgments, they fell into the exact same cognitive traps as everyone else. The training helped with careful, deliberate thinking, but the gut was just as vulnerable. Here's a question worth sitting with. What if the decisions you feel most confident about are the ones where your brain is working hardest against you? Because confidence and accuracy are not the same thing, not even close. Your brain generates feelings of certainty. It's one of its default functions. That sense of knowing, the click, the clarity, the yeah, this is right, that's a feeling your mind produces, not a signal of truth. And there's almost no internal warning system that tells you the difference, which means you've probably walked away from decisions feeling solid, grounded, sure, when in fact you were riding a wave of invisible influence you never saw coming. That's not weakness. It's not stupidity. It's just how the machinery works. And by the end of this, you're going to understand that machinery better than most people ever will, including the parts of it that were quietly shaping your choices long before you sat down to think things through. Stay with me, because we're just getting started. Let me paint you a picture. A judge sits down to review a criminal case. He's experienced, decades on the bench. He's seen thousands of cases, read thousands of arguments, listened to thousands of lawyers. He is by every reasonable measure an expert. Before rendering a sentence, someone hands him a pair of dice. It's supposedly part of a demonstration. The dice land on 3. He goes on to deliver his verdict. Now here's what nobody told him. The dice were loaded. They always landed on either 3 or 9, and the groups of judges who rolled 9, those judges, statistically, handed down longer sentences, not by coincidence, not by a small margin. The judges who rolled 9 sentenced defendants to nearly twice as much time as the judges who rolled 3. A random number, rolled on a pair of dice, before a legal decision, changed the sentence, and not one of those judges had any idea it happened. This is called the anchoring effect, and once you see it, really see it, you'll start noticing it everywhere. In negotiations, in stores, in the way prices are displayed, in the way your doctor frames your diagnosis, in the way your boss structures a conversation before asking you for something. The brain, when it faces an uncertain question, how long should this sentence be? How much is this house worth? What's a fair salary? Reaches for a starting point, any starting point, and whatever number, image, or idea it grabs first, that becomes the gravitational center that every other thought orbits around, even if that starting point was completely arbitrary, even if it came from a pair of dice. But anchoring is only one piece of the puzzle. There's another force working on your decisions, and it might be even more powerful. It has to do with loss. Researchers discovered something striking when they started studying how people respond to potential gains versus potential losses. Here's the setup. Imagine someone offers you a bet. Flip a coin. If it lands heads, you win $130. If it lands tails, you lose $100. The math is clearly in your favor. Most people, when you just think about it logically, should take that bet. Most people don't, not even close. To get most people to even consider accepting a loss of $100, the potential gain has to be around $200 or more. The pain of losing is nearly twice as intense as the pleasure of an equivalent gain. Think about what that means for your life, not in abstract economics, but in the actual texture of your days. Every time you hold on to a dead-end job because leaving feels like giving up something you already have. Every time you stay in a relationship that isn't working because walking away feels heavier than the daily friction of staying. Every time you refuse to cut your losses on an investment because admitting the loss makes it real. The fear of losing what you have warps the way you see what's possible. It's not a flaw in your character. It's a feature of the machinery. Your brain weights losses more heavily than gains because, in the evolutionary timeline, losing resources often meant dying. That calculus doesn't update just because you're standing in a modern world where the loss is money in a retirement account. And here's where it gets even more layered. When people experience this kind of fear, this weight of potential loss, they don't just become cautious. They sometimes flip into the opposite direction entirely. Studies found something counterintuitive. When people are already in a losing position, they become more willing to take risks, not less, because staying still guarantees the loss. And something in the brain would rather gamble for a shot at breaking even than accept the reality of what's already gone. This is the pattern underneath a lot of decisions people deeply regret. The investor who doubles down on a collapsing position, the person who takes increasingly desperate measures to save something that's already ended, not because they're irrational, but because the emotional weight of loss created a momentum that ordinary logical thinking couldn't override. You've probably felt this, that particular stubbornness that lives in the chest, that refusal to let something go even when part of you knows it's already gone. Now you know what it is. If this is changing how you see things, you're not alone. Drop a comment with the decision you wish you'd made differently. And if you haven't hit like yet, now's the time. Here's a question nobody ever asks out loud, but almost everyone has felt at least once. Why did that feel so obvious and still turn out so wrong? The answer lives in what researchers call the illusion of understanding, and it's one of the most quietly dangerous forces shaping your life. When something happens, a business collapses, a relationship falls apart, a decision you made 2 years ago blows up in your face, your brain immediately rewrites the story. Not intentionally, not dishonestly, it just fills in the gaps. It connects the dots, smooths out the uncertainty, and produces a clean narrative that makes the outcome feel like it was always going to happen this way. This is called hindsight bias, and it doesn't just affect how you understand the past. It contaminates how you prepare for the future. Because if your brain tells you, "I should have seen that coming," it creates a false sense that next time you will see it coming, that your judgment, properly applied, will catch the signals before they become catastrophes. It makes you feel like the lesson has been learned, like you've been upgraded, but the signals aren't usually written in ink. They're written in fog. And studies looking at how people evaluated decisions, both their own and others, found something uncomfortable. When people knew a bad outcome had occurred, they rated the decision that led to it as obviously flawed, even when, at the time it was made, it was the most reasonable option available, even when the people making it were doing everything right. One study put it in stark relief. People were given either the information available at the time of a real civic decision, or that same information, plus the knowledge that the decision led to disaster. The group that knew about the disaster overwhelmingly said the decision-makers had been negligent. The group that didn't know about the disaster largely said the decision was reasonable. Same decision, same information. Wildly different judgments, based on nothing more than knowing how it ended. This matters for you personally, because it shapes the invisible standard you hold yourself to. Every time you look back at a choice you made and feel the burn of "I should have known," there's a real chance you're judging a past version of yourself using information that version of you didn't have. That's not accountability. That's just a cognitive trick your memory is playing. And there's a companion illusion that runs alongside this one, even more seductive: the illusion of validity. It works like this. The more internally consistent a story feels, the more confident you become. Not more accurate, more confident. When all the pieces of a narrative fit together neatly, when your logic feels airtight, when your read on a situation just clicks, your brain generates a warm signal of certainty that feels like truth. But coherence is not the same as correctness. Your brain is a meaning-making machine. It will build the most coherent story it can out of whatever information it has, even if that information is incomplete, filtered, or subtly distorted by your previous expectations. And once that story feels solid, the system too, the deliberate, rational part of your mind, largely just endorses it, adds some reasoning, signs its name at the bottom. Researchers found this pattern across domains: in finance, in medicine, in law, in everyday personal choices. Experts who had been making predictions for years, confident predictions, detailed predictions, showed accuracy rates barely better than chance when those predictions were tracked over time, yet their confidence never wavered. The feeling of knowing remained steady even as the record showed something far more humbling. This is why knowing about bias isn't the same as being free from it. You can read every book ever written on cognitive psychology. You can know the names, the studies, the mechanisms, and still, when your own System 1 whispers its confident verdict into the ear of your System 2, the rationalization comes naturally. The story assembles itself, and it feels true. The gap between intelligence and rationality is real, it's measurable. And some of the sharpest minds in any room are running just as hard on biased autopilot as everyone else. They're just better at building elegant justifications for what the autopilot already decided. So what do you do with that? That question, the practical one, the one that actually changes something, that's what the next part is about. You've been lied to about what a rational decision actually looks like. Not by any single person, not by any conspiracy, just by the accumulated cultural myth that careful thinking means trusting the voice in your head more, analyzing longer, being more confident in your conclusions. But what the research points toward, quietly, persistently, across decades of study, is something different. Something that feels almost counterintuitive until it doesn't. The mind that makes better decisions isn't the one that trusts itself most. It's the one that's built a working relationship with its own uncertainty. Here's what that looks like in practice. There's a phenomenon researchers documented in the way people evaluate their own judgment before making choices. When individuals were asked to estimate something uncertain, the cost of a construction project, the time a task would take, the likelihood of a plan succeeding, they almost universally underestimated the influence of factors outside their immediate view. They thought about their project, their situation, their track record. They built their forecast from the inside out. What they didn't do, what almost nobody instinctively does, is zoom out, pull up comparable cases. Look at how similar projects have played out for other people in similar circumstances. Ask what the base rate of success looks like for this category of decision, this type of venture, this particular move. When people were given that outside information, the baseline rates, the averages, the patterns across many similar cases, their predictions improved. Not perfectly, but meaningfully. That single shift, from the inside view to the outside view, consistently brought estimates closer to reality. Think about how rarely that shift happens in your own life. When you're planning something, how often do you genuinely seek out information about how often things like yours succeed? Not the inspiring success stories, not the cautionary tales, the actual distribution, the full picture of outcomes across a real population of people who tried the same thing. It's an uncomfortable kind of honesty, because the moment you take the outside view seriously, some things you were excited about start looking less promising. Some risks you thought were unique to your situation turn out to be common. Some confidence starts to soften around the edges. But here's what that discomfort buys you. It buys you calibration, a closer alignment between what you believe and what's actually true. And calibrated decisions, even imperfect ones, even ones made under real uncertainty, are systematically better than confident ones built on illusions. There's another layer to this, a harder one. The psychological weight of past investment, what's sometimes called sunk cost, doesn't just make it hard to walk away from bad situations. It actively reshapes the way you evaluate the present. The project you've already poured 6 months into looks more valuable than an identical project you're considering from scratch. The relationship you've already invested years in carries a gravity that has nothing to do with whether it's serving you well today. The money already spent becomes a silent vote for spending more. This is the brain treating the past as currency, and it doesn't work that way. The past is spent. It has no vote in what happens next. What matters is what's true right now, what the realistic trajectory looks like from here, and what a clear-eyed assessment of the future actually tells you. But try telling that to a gut that's already committed. This is why some of the most important decisions in a person's life are the ones that feel hardest to make cleanly. Not because they're objectively complex, but because the machinery underneath them is running at full emotional load. Loss aversion is pulling in one direction. Sunk cost is pulling in another. The illusion of understanding is whispering that you already know how this plays out, and all of that noise is invisible, silent. It doesn't announce itself. So what do you actually do? You start by accepting that your decisions are always happening inside a system, a psychological system that has its own rules, its own rhythms, its own vulnerabilities. Not because you're broken, not because you're weaker than you should be, but because this is the architecture of the human mind. Every single person walking around on this planet is navigating the same terrain. The difference isn't in having a mind that doesn't make these errors. The difference is in knowing the errors well enough to occasionally, not always but occasionally, catch them before they compound into something you're looking back on with that familiar sting of, I should have seen it coming. Because now you've seen it, not perfectly, not completely, but you've looked at the machinery. You've seen where the gears catch. You know now that the voice of certainty and the signal of truth are not the same thing. That confidence is a feeling, not a fact. That loss stings harder than gain feels good, and that fact alone is quietly steering more of your choices than you ever knew. And knowing that, really knowing it, not just in the intellectual sense but in the felt sense, changes something. It gives you just enough of a pause, just enough space between the feeling and the choice. And in that space, that's where better decisions get made. If this video opened something up for you, share it with one person who needs to hear it. And subscribe. The next one goes even deeper.